Lee Dae-ho stared at the empty beer bottles on his kitchen counter and counted his money for the third time that week. The numbers did not change. Rent was due in 5 days, and he was short by half. His part-time job at the campus bookstore barely covered food, let alone the expensive apartment near Neo-Seoul University. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the roommate ads again. Most people wanted someone who could pay 3 months in advance. Others wanted references from previous landlords. Dae-ho had neither. His parents lived too far away to help, and his pride would not let him ask anyway. The doorbell rang. Dae-ho looked at the time and frowned. He was not expecting anyone. When he opened the door, a tall woman stood in the hallway. She had pale, blue skin that seemed to glow softly under the fluorescent lights. Her limbs were longer than a human's, and her dark eyes were bigger than any eyes he had ever seen. Those eyes seemed to pull light into them instead of reflecting it back. "Are you Lee Dae-ho?" she asked. Her voice was quiet and careful, like she was testing each word before saying it. "Yes," he said, still staring. "I am Vera. The university. Housing office sent me. They said you need a roommate." Dae-ho blinked. He had filled out the emergency housing form weeks ago, but never heard back. "You want to live here?" She nodded once. "I can pay half the rent. I am clean and quiet. I will not bother you." He looked at her again. She was definitely alien, but she seemed harmless. The Galactic Exchange program brought students from all over the galaxy to Earth. He had seen dozens of different species on campus, though most kept to themselves. "What species are you?" he asked, then immediately felt rude for asking. "Kelani," she said. "We are peaceful. We do not cause trouble." Dae-ho thought about his empty wallet. "Can you really pay half?" She reached into a small bag and pulled out a credit chip. When she handed it to him, their fingers touched briefly. Her skin was surprisingly warm. The chip showed enough money for 6 months of rent. "Okay," he said. "You can move in." That was how Vera became his roommate. For the first week, Dae-ho barely knew she was there. She moved like a ghost through their shared space. Her footsteps made no sound on the old wooden floors. She never turned on the television or played music. She never used the kitchen except to get water from the tap. She had no belongings except a small bag and some clothes that looked like they were made from materials he did not recognize. The fabric seemed to shift colors slightly when she moved, going from dark blue to lighter blue to almost silver. Dae-ho tried to be friendly. He offered to share his dinner the first night, holding out a plate of rice and vegetables. She looked at the food for a long moment, then shook her head politely. He left some fruit on the counter the next day. It was gone by evening, but she never said thank you. He tried talking to her while they crossed paths in the hallway or kitchen. "How are your classes?" he would ask. She would nod. "Do you like Earth?" Another nod. "Is there anything you need?" A small shake of her head. After 2 weeks, his friend Kim Hana came over to study. She stopped in the doorway when she saw Vera, sitting at the small table by the window, reading something on a device that looked nothing like a human tablet. "That's your roommate?" Hana whispered. "Her name is Vera," Dae-ho said in a normal voice. "She's from the exchange program." Vera looked up at them. Her large, dark eyes moved from Dae-ho to Hana and back. She nodded once at Hana, then returned to her reading. "Does she ever talk?" Hana asked when they went to Dae-ho's room. "Not really. I think maybe it's a cultural thing. The Kelani are supposed to be very private." "It's weird," Hana said. "Like living with a statue." But Deho did. Not think Vera was like a statue. Statues did not make the air feel different when they entered a room. Statues did not make him notice small sounds he had never heard before, like a faint humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Strange things started happening around the third week. His old television, which had been flickering for months, suddenly worked perfectly. The picture was clearer than it had ever been. His laptop, which usually overheated and shut down during long study sessions, now ran cool and fast. The plants on his windowsill, which had been dying slowly for months, began to grow again. New leaves appeared overnight. The colors became richer and brighter. He had not changed anything about how he cared for them. One morning, he found that a crack in the bathroom wall had somehow gotten smaller. He stared at it for several minutes, trying to remember if it had always been that size. By the end of the week, the crack was gone completely. At night, he sometimes heard soft sounds through the thin walls. Not talking or music, but something else. It sounded almost like singing, but without words. The melody was beautiful and sad at the same time. It made him feel calm in a way he could not explain. He never saw Vera making these sounds. When he got up to investigate, everything was always silent. Her room was dark and she seemed to be sleeping. "Maybe she sleep-sings," he told Hannah when she asked about the strange improvements to his apartment. "Maybe she's some kind of repair robot," Hannah said. "Does she eat? Does she shower? I've never seen her do anything normal." Deho realized that was true. He had never seen Vera eat, though food sometimes disappeared from the kitchen. He had never heard water running in the bathroom when she was supposed to be using it. She never seemed to generate any trash or dirty dishes. One evening, he worked up the courage to knock on her bedroom door. "Vera? Is everything okay? Do you need anything?" There was a long pause. Then her quiet voice came through the door. "I am well. Thank you for asking. If you ever want to talk or hang out, I'm usually in the living room after dinner." Another pause. "That is kind. I prefer quiet." He stood outside her door for a moment longer, listening to the faint humming sound that seemed to be coming from inside the walls. Then he went back to his room, more curious than ever about his silent roommate. That night, he dreamed of music that had no instruments and colors that had no names. When he woke up, he felt like something important was about to happen, though he could not say what or when. 3 months after Vera moved in, Deho caught the Martian flu. It started as a headache during his morning xenobiology class, but by afternoon he could barely stand. His body ached like he had been hit by a truck, and his temperature climbed, so high that his vision began to blur. He stumbled home and collapsed on his bed fully clothed. The room spun around him like a carnival ride. Every muscle in his body hurt, and breathing felt like work. The Martian flu was known for hitting humans hard. Most people needed at least a week to recover, and some ended up in the hospital. Deho expected to suffer alone. Vera had never shown interest in his daily life before. She was always polite but distant, like a neighbor who happened to share his address. He figured she would avoid him completely while he was sick. He was wrong. The first thing he noticed was a cool cloth on his forehead. He opened his eyes and saw Vera sitting in the chair beside his bed. Her large, dark eyes studied his face with what looked like concern. When she saw he was awake, she lifted the cloth, dipped it in a bowl of cold water, and placed it back on his head. "You have fever," she said quietly. It was more words than she usually spoke in a week. Deho tried to sit up, but the room tilted dangerously. "I'm okay," he said, though his voice came out as a croak. Vera made a sound that might have been disagreement. She reached for a glass of water on the nightstand and held it while he drank. The water was the perfect temperature, not too cold for his sensitive throat. Over the next 3 days, Vera became his constant caretaker. She brought him water every few hours. She made simple soup that somehow tasted better than anything he had ever cooked for himself. When his fever spiked and he shivered uncontrollably, she brought extra blankets and tucked them around him with gentle hands. She never left him alone for long. Even when he was sleeping, he would sometimes wake to find her sitting quietly in the chair, reading her strange device, or simply watching him breathe. Her presence was oddly comforting. The room felt calmer when she was there. During the worst of the fever, Deho had strange dreams. He dreamed he was floating in warm water that hummed with soft music. He dreamed of lights that danced in patterns too complex for his mind to follow. And through it all, he heard a voice singing to him in a language he did not recognize. The voice was beautiful and sad, like the night sounds he sometimes heard through the walls. But in his dreams, the voice was clearer. It seemed to wrap around him like a blanket, making the pain in his body fade to a distant ache. When he woke on the 4th day, his fever had broken. He felt weak, but human again. Vera was asleep in the chair, her long limbs folded in a way that looked uncomfortable. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow softly in the morning light coming through his window. "Vera," he said softly. Her eyes opened immediately, as if she had not really been sleeping. "You are better?" "Thanks to you." He sat up slowly, testing his strength. "You didn't have to take care of me." She tilted her head, studying him with those deep dark eyes. "You were sick. Care was needed. But we barely know each other. I mean, we've been living together for months, but we never really talk." "Talking is not always necessary," she said. But then she did something unexpected. She smiled. It was small and brief, but it was definitely a smile. After that day, something changed. Between them, Vera was still quiet, but she seemed more present. She began leaving small gifts around the apartment. Deho would find strange crystals on his desk that seemed to change color depending on the light. Beautiful pressed flowers appeared on the kitchen counter, though he had never seen plants like them growing anywhere on Earth. The most unusual gifts were her drawings. She left them in places where he would find them by accident. They were geometric patterns drawn on paper that looked handmade. The lines were perfectly straight and the curves perfectly smooth, as if drawn by a machine. But when Deho looked at them closely, the patterns seemed to move slightly, shifting and changing when he was not looking directly at them. He started leaving things for her, too, small snacks that disappeared overnight. Books about Earth culture, though he never saw her reading them. A small plant for her room, which she accepted with another of her rare smiles. His friend Hannah noticed the change immediately when she came over to study. "Your apartment feels different," she said, looking around the living room. "Warmer, somehow." "Vera's been more friendly lately," Deho said. "I think she's getting used to living here." "Have you asked her about her home planet? I've been reading about the Kelani for my comparative cultures class. There's not much information available. They're supposed to be very mysterious." Deho realized he had never asked Vera about her home. He knew almost nothing about her life before she came to Earth. That evening, he worked up the courage to try. "Vera," he said when they were both in the kitchen, "what is your home planet like?" She paused in the middle of filling her water glass. For a moment, he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "Very different from here." "Different how?" "The light is softer. The sounds are deeper. Things grow in patterns that make sense." Her words were carefully chosen, as if she was translating from another language. "Do you miss it?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Sometimes. But Earth has interesting qualities." "Like what?" "Chaos," she said. "Beautiful chaos." It was the longest conversation they had ever had, and Dae-ho felt like he was finally starting to see the real person behind her quiet facade. That night, he fell asleep to the sound of her soft humming through the walls, and for the first time, it did not seem mysterious. It seemed like home, but he still had no idea what she really was, or why the air around her sometimes seemed to shimmer like heat waves on a summer day. He had no idea that every electronic device in the apartment now worked better because of her presence, or that the plants thrived because she sang to them in frequencies only they could hear. Most importantly, he had no idea that taking care of him during his illness had changed something fundamental in Vera herself. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she had allowed herself to care about a human being, and that caring was about to lead them both into territory neither of them was prepared for. The evening that changed everything started like any other. Dae-ho had been studying late at the university library, working on a research paper about interspecies communication patterns. The library closed at midnight, and he hurried home through the empty streets, eager to get some sleep before his morning exam. He climbed the stairs to his apartment quietly, not wanting to wake Vera. As he approached his door, he noticed something strange. Light was leaking out from under the door, but it was not the normal yellow light from their lamps. This light was blue and white, and it seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. He put his key in the lock carefully and opened the door just a crack. What he saw made him freeze. The living room was filled with impossible light. It came from everywhere and nowhere, creating patterns in the air that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The furniture cast shadows in directions that made no sense, as if there were light sources floating in empty space, and in the center of it all was Vera. But it was not the Vera he knew. The pale blue figure he had been living with for months was still there, but she was flickering like a bad television signal. Around her and through her, Dae-ho could see something else. Geometric patterns of pure light moved in complex dances. Lines of energy connected points in space that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his mind could process. The air itself was singing. It was the same melody he had heard through the walls at night, but now he could feel it in his bones. The sound seemed to come from the structure of the apartment itself, as if the walls and floor had become musical instruments. Every surface hummed in harmony, creating music that was more beautiful than anything he had ever experienced. Vera was conducting it all somehow. Her arms moved in slow, precise gestures, and the patterns of light responded. Where she pointed, the singing grew stronger. When she turned her hand, the colors shifted from blue to silver to something beyond color that his eyes could not name. Dae-ho stood frozen in the doorway, afraid to move or breathe. He felt like he was watching something sacred, something that was never meant for human eyes. The beauty of it made his chest tight with emotion he could not identify. Then Vera turned and saw him. Everything stopped. The light disappeared instantly. The singing cut off like someone had unplugged a speaker. The air returned to normal so quickly that Deho wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. But Vera's expression told him he had not. Her large, dark eyes were wide with what looked like fear. She stood perfectly still in the center of the living room, looking exactly like the quiet alien roommate he thought he knew, but now he could see the truth behind her facade. Now he knew she was hiding something incredible. Neither of them moved for several long seconds. Then Deho stepped into the apartment and closed the door behind him. "What was that?" he asked, quietly. Vera said nothing. She seemed to be deciding whether to run or speak. Finally, she walked to her room and returned with a small device that looked like a silver egg. She touched it, and it began to glow softly. "You were not supposed to." "See?" her voice said, but now it had layers and harmonics that seemed to resonate inside his skull. The translator was showing him her real voice, not the simplified version she had been using. "See what? What are you?" She sat down on the couch, her movements careful and deliberate. "What you see as me," she said slowly, "is not real. It is a projection, a disguise. A disguise for what? For what I really am." She touched the translator again, and her voice became even more complex. "My people exist partially outside what you call normal space. We are beings of harmony and resonance. What you saw was me maintaining the structural integrity of this, dwelling through harmonic manipulation." Deho felt his knees go weak. He sat down heavily in the chair across from her. "You're not really humanoid. No. The form you see is created to make other species comfortable. We learned long ago that our true appearance frightens most beings. What do you really look like?" Vera was quiet for a long moment. "It is difficult to explain in terms your mind can process. We are patterns of organized energy. We exist as living harmonics that can influence the fundamental frequencies that hold matter together." "The singing I heard," Deho said. "That was you?" "Yes. We do not speak as you do. We communicate through resonance. What you call singing is how we interact with our environment. I was tuning the apartment structure to optimal efficiency. Is that why all my electronics work better now? Why my plants are growing so well? Yes, I could not help myself. It is our nature to create harmony wherever we exist." Deho leaned forward, his scientific mind racing with questions. "Why do you hide? Why the disguise?" Vera's projected face showed something that might have been pain. "Because every species that has seen our true form has responded with fear or aggression. We have been hunted, enslaved, and used as weapons. The only way to survive contact with other beings is to remain hidden." "How long have your people been hiding?" "Centuries. We make contact only when necessary and always in disguise. We have become very good at creating convincing projections. But you're here on Earth, at the university. Why take the risk?" "Because we have been watching humanity," she said. "Your species is young but unusual. You respond to difference with curiosity instead of fear. We wanted to study you more closely. So I'm some kind of test subject?" "Not exactly." She looked uncomfortable. "You were chosen randomly. I was supposed to observe human behavior and report back to my people, but something unexpected happened." "What?" "I began to care about you. When you became ill and I chose to help you, I violated our protocols. We are not supposed to form emotional attachments to other species. Deho stared at her. You care about me. Yes. And that is dangerous for both of us. Why dangerous? Because if my people discover that I have revealed myself to you, they will recall me for memory cleansing. All traces of my time here will be erased from my mind. I will forget you completely. And if they don't find out, then I continue to live a lie. I pretend to be something I am not. Forever. Deho looked at the alien sitting across from him. The quiet roommate he had grown fond of was so much more than he had ever imagined. She was a being of living music and light, hiding her true nature to protect both herself and him. Show me, he said. What? Show me what you really are. You will be frightened, maybe, but I won't run away. Vera studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Close your eyes first. Open them gradually, and remember that what you see is still me. Deho closed his eyes. He heard the translator being turned off, and then the singing began again, soft at first, then growing stronger. The air began to feel different against his skin, charged with energy that made his hair stand up. Now, Vera's voice said, but it no longer came from in front of him. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. He opened his eyes slowly. The living room was full of wonder. What Deho saw when he opened his eyes was beyond anything his mind had prepared for. Vera was still there, but her humanoid form was now transparent, like looking at someone through clear water. Through and around her, geometric patterns of light moved in complex dances. The patterns were not random. They had purpose and meaning, like written language made of living fire. The most amazing thing was how beautiful it was. Instead of feeling afraid, Deho felt wonder. The light patterns were not harsh or alien. They were graceful and peaceful, like watching a slow dance performed by beings made of starlight. You're incredible, he said, and meant it. The patterns shifted, becoming brighter. Vera's voice came from everywhere at once, layered with harmonics that made his chest vibrate pleasantly. You are not afraid. Should I be? Every other species has been. Even the peaceful ones react with terror when they see us like this. Deho stood up slowly and moved closer. The air around Vera felt warm and alive, like standing near a waterfall on a summer day. Maybe humans are different. That is what we hope to understand. Over the following weeks, Vera began to trust him with small demonstrations of her abilities. She showed him how she could tune his laptop to run perfectly by singing to its electronic components. She made his dying houseplants grow into impossible shapes by harmonizing with their cellular structure. Most impressively, she repaired the crack in his bathroom wall by convincing the concrete molecules to realign themselves. It is not magic, she explained when he asked how she did it. Everything in your universe vibrates at specific frequencies, matter, energy, even space itself. We can perceive these frequencies directly and influence them through resonance. Like tuning a guitar string, similar but with every atom in existence. Deho found himself staying home more often, fascinated by this new side of his roommate. They would sit together in the evenings while she worked on what she called harmony maintenance around the apartment. The walls would hum softly and the air would shimmer with barely visible patterns. But keeping the secret became harder when his friend Hana noticed the changes. Your apartment is different again, she said during one of their study sessions. Everything feels more Organized. And why do all your electronics work so perfectly? Your laptop used to crash every 20 minutes. I've been taking better care of my stuff, Daiho said, but he could tell Hana did not believe him. The situation reached a crisis point the following week. Hana came over unexpectedly while Vera was practicing a complex harmonic exercise in the living room. Daiho was in his bedroom and did not hear the knock. Hana used the spare key he had given her and walked straight into a room full of impossible light. Daiho heard her gasp and ran to the living room. He found Hana standing frozen in the doorway, staring at Vera's half-manifested form. The light patterns were swirling in agitated spirals, and the air hummed with distressed harmonics. "Hana," Daiho said carefully, "let me explain." But Hana was not screaming or running away. Instead, she was staring at Vera with the same expression she got when looking at interesting data in their xenobiology classes. "She's not really humanoid," Hana said quietly. "No," Daiho said. "She's not." "What is she?" Vera's projection solidified and the light patterns faded. She looked at Hana with those large, dark eyes, clearly expecting rejection or fear. "I am Kelani," she said simply. "What you saw is my true form." Hana walked closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming any fear she might have felt. "The patterns I saw, they were organized, purposeful. You were doing something to the room. Maintaining harmonic balance," Vera said. "It is instinctive for my people." "You're living music," Hana said with wonder. "Living mathematics." Vera tilted her head. "That is an accurate description." Instead of being frightened, Hana peppered Vera with questions. How did the harmonic manipulation work? What frequencies were involved? How did her people's biology allow them to exist partially outside normal space? Vera answered as best she could, but she seemed puzzled by Hana's reaction. "You are not afraid," she said finally. "Why would I be afraid? You're the most amazing discovery in the history of xenobiology. Do you realize what this means for our understanding of consciousness and energy-matter interaction?" That evening, after Hana had gone home with her head full of new ideas, Vera sat quietly in the living room for a long time. "Your friend's reaction troubles me," she said when Daiho asked what was wrong. "Troubles you?" "She thinks you're incredible." That is the problem. In all our observations of other species, we have never encountered a reaction like hers, or yours. When other beings discover our true nature, they respond with fear, greed, or the desire to use us as weapons. Humans seem to respond with wonder and acceptance. Is that bad? It is unprecedented. My people have been debating for decades whether humans represent a new hope for peaceful coexistence or a more sophisticated threat. Your reaction suggests the former, but we have been wrong before. What do you mean? Vera was quiet for a moment. There was another species, long ago, that seemed accepting at first. They called us beautiful just as you do. But once they understood our abilities, they tried to breed us like animals. They wanted to create weapons from our children. Daiho felt sick. That's horrible. It nearly destroyed both our species. Since then, we have maintained strict isolation protocols. No contact, without disguise, no emotional attachments, no revelations of our true nature. But you told me anyway. Because something about humans feels different. But I could be wrong. I could be endangering my entire people because I have developed feelings for a species I do not truly understand. You have feelings for humans? Or just for me? She looked at him with an expression he could not read. Both, I think. That is why this is so dangerous. The next day, Deho could not concentrate on his classes. He kept thinking about what Vera had said about her people's fears. That evening he found her sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights. Vera, he said. What if there was a way to prove that humans are different, that we can be trusted? How? What if we could show your people how humans react to the truth? Not just me and Hana, but others. That would require revealing ourselves, openly. The risk is too great. But what if we started small, carefully, with people who could help bridge the gap between our species? Vera turned to look at him. You would risk your safety for my people? Yes, because I think understanding between species is more important than fear. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, There may be a way, but it would require trusting humans with something more precious than my life. What? The harmonic frequencies that make up our language, our most sacred songs. If we taught them to humans, and humans used them to create rather than destroy, it would prove your species' peaceful intentions. And if humans did try to use them as weapons, then my people would have no choice but to defend themselves. It could mean war between our species. Deho felt the weight of that possibility. But if it worked, if humans proved themselves trustworthy, then the Kelani could finally end their isolation. We could join the galactic community openly. He looked at his roommate, this incredible being who had risked everything just by trusting him with the truth. What do you need me to do? Vera's projection flickered slightly, showing hints of the light patterns beneath. Help me compose a message to my people. A song that proves humans and Kelani can create harmony together. I don't know anything about music. You know about human emotions, about hope and trust and the desire to understand. That is music, too, in its own way. As they began to plan, neither of them realized that they were about to set in motion events that would change both their species forever. The message came at the worst possible time. Deho was helping Vera work on their harmonic composition when her personal communicator began pulsing with urgent light. She touched it, and complex patterns appeared in the air above the device. Her face went pale. What is it? Deho asked. My people have detected my exposure. They know I revealed myself to humans. Her voice was steady, but he could see fear in her eyes. They are ordering my immediate return for memory cleansing. Memory cleansing? They will remove all traces of my time on Earth from my mind. I will forget you, forget Hana, forget everything I have learned about humanity. When they are finished, I will believe that humans are just another primitive species to be avoided. Deho felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. How long do we have? The transport ship will arrive tomorrow night. Once I am aboard, there will be no way to stop the process. They stared at each other for a moment. Then Hana's voice came from the hallway. Deho, I brought Professor Park like you asked. Deho had forgotten they were coming. 3 days earlier, he and Hana had convinced Dr. Park Byung-soo, their xenobiology professor, to meet Vera. They thought having an academic witness to her revelation might help their cause. Now it seemed too late. We have to tell them what's happening, Deho said. When Vera explained the situation to Dr. Park and Hana, the professor's reaction was immediate and decisive. We cannot let them take you, he said. What you represent is too important. The potential for interspecies cooperation, for expanding our understanding of consciousness itself. You do not understand. Vera said. If I do not return, my people will assume I have been captured or killed. They will write off humanity as dangerous and potentially hostile. Then we prove them wrong, Hana said. Right now? Tonight? How? With your song, Daeho said. The harmonic composition we've been working on. We broadcast it to your people before they can take you. That is impossible. I would need access to a quantum communication array powerful enough to reach my home world. The university's equipment is not sufficient. Dr. Park smiled grimly. Actually, it might be. I have been working on modifications to our deep space communication system. If we could boost the signal using harmonic resonance, you would risk your career to help me? I would risk much more than that to prevent an interspecies war. They spent the next 18 hours preparing. Dr. Park arranged access to the university's communication lab after hours. Hana helped Vera refine the harmonic composition, adding human musical elements that complemented the Kelani frequencies. Daeho worked on the emotional content, helping Vera translate human concepts of hope and friendship into resonance patterns that her people could understand. The song they created was unlike anything that had ever existed. It began with pure Kelani harmonics, the mathematical precision that was the foundation of their communication. But woven through these frequencies were human melodies, imperfect and emotional, and full of the chaotic beauty that Vera had learned to love about Earth. The composition told a story. It spoke of two different species learning to trust each other. It showed how differences could create new kinds of beauty when combined with understanding instead of fear. Most importantly, it demonstrated that humans could work with Kelani harmonics without trying to control or weaponize them. Will your people understand what we're trying to say? Daeho asked, as they made final preparations. If they listen with open minds, Vera said, but there is no guarantee they will. My people have been isolated for so long that many fear any contact with other species. Then we make sure they can't ignore us, Hana said. They waited until midnight, when the Kelani homeworld would be in optimal position for communication. Dr. Park activated the university's quantum array and began boosting its power with the harmonic resonance patterns Vera had taught him. Ready? He asked. Vera nodded. She had dropped her humanoid projection completely, appearing as she truly was, a complex pattern of living light and energy. The lab filled with her natural harmonics as she began to sing. The song started softly, just Vera's voice carrying the traditional Kelani greeting patterns. But as it continued, Hana joined in with human musical phrases, and Daeho added spoken words that expressed humanity's desire for friendship and understanding. Dr. Park monitored the communication array as their combined voices were converted into quantum signals and broadcast across space. The signal is stronger than anything we've ever transmitted, he said. The harmonic resonance is amplifying our power output by orders of magnitude. As they performed their composition, something magical happened in the lab. The air itself began to sing in harmony with them. Electronic equipment hummed in perfect tune. Even the walls and floor seemed to vibrate with musical purpose. Daeho realized this was what Vera had been trying to explain about her people. They did not just make music, they became music, turning themselves and everything around them into instruments in a cosmic orchestra. When the song ended, they waited in tense silence. The quantum array continued to hum with residual harmonics, but there was no immediate response from space. How long before we know if it worked? Hana asked. Kelani decision-making is conducted through harmonic consensus, Vera said. If our message reached them, Every member of my species will be experiencing our song simultaneously. The response will come quickly. They did not have to wait long. 15 minutes later, the communication array began receiving signals, but these were not the harsh, commanding frequencies that had ordered Vera's return. These signals were complex and beautiful, layered with harmonics that made the lab equipment chime like wind bells. Vera's light patterns shifted to colors Dayho had never seen before. "They are singing back," she said, wonder in her voice. "The E Collective is responding with songs I have never heard, new compositions created in response to ours." "What are they saying?" "They are curious. For the first time in centuries, the Kelani collective is singing questions instead of prohibitions. They want to know more about humanity." The response signals continued for over an hour. When they finally ended, Vera's projection was brighter than Dayho had ever seen it. "The vote was nearly unanimous," she said. "The collective has decided to end the isolation protocols. They are sending diplomatic ships to Earth instead of memory cleaners." "You mean?" "My people will reveal themselves openly to humanity, and they want to begin cultural exchange programs immediately." Dr. Park was already making excited notes about the implications for xenobiological research. Hana was calculating how many academic papers this discovery would generate. But Dayho just looked at his roommate and smiled. "So you get to stay?" "I get to stay. And soon, I will not be the only Kelani on Earth." 6 months later, Dayho watched from his apartment window as the first group of openly manifested Kelani walked through the university campus. Their light patterns danced in the afternoon sun, visible to anyone who cared to look. Students and faculty stopped to watch in amazement, but no one ran in fear. Some humans even tried to sing along with the Kelani harmonics, creating strange but beautiful musical collaborations on street corners and in dormitories. Vera stood beside him at the window, her true form shimmering like a aurora. "Your species continues to surprise us," she said. "Every day we discover new ways that humans and Kelani can create harmony together." "Any regrets about revealing yourself?" "Only that we waited so long." She turned to look at him. "You taught us something important about trust. Sometimes the greatest risk is also the greatest opportunity." Dayho thought about the night when he had first seen her true form, when fear could have driven them apart, but curiosity had brought them together instead. "I think that's what makes humans special," he said. "We're not the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we're pretty good at seeing potential where others see problems." Outside, a group of human and Kelani students were attempting to harmonize one of Earth's folk songs with traditional Kelani frequencies. The result was chaotic and beautiful, full of mistakes that somehow made it more perfect. "Beautiful chaos," Vera said, echoing her words from their first real conversation. "The best kind," Dayho agreed. As the sun set over Neo-Sol, the apartment filled with the sound of two species learning to sing together. And in that harmony, both human and Kelani could hear the promise of a future where differences were not barriers to overcome, but opportunities to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The quiet roommate had become the bridge between worlds, and through her courage to trust, both species had found something they had been missing: the joy of harmony with others who were beautifully, wonderfully different.